You know what? You know what? I'm just going to say it. Packers are going to be good this year. No, maybe not contenders. Maybe they're not going to win the North. But they're going to be a lot better than a lot of people are thinking they are. What's up, everybody, to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews, where I'm your host, John Del Rey. Yeah, today, we are going to tackle the first half-ish, because it's weird now with 17 games, but like the first half of the Packers 2023 schedule. And I'm going to say, at this point right now, whether I think the Packers are going to win or lose each of the first set of games. Of course, it's June. Stuff's gonna change. Maybe players get hurt. Maybe players are bad when we don't expect them to. Maybe they're amazing when we don't expect them to. Whatever. I know this is way too early for this, but nonetheless, let's dive in and assess the Green Bay Packers' chances. Now, this is much more. I talk ad nauseum about the Packers themselves. This is more so almost about their opponents. What have they done this offseason? What challenges do they present to the Green Bay Packers as the Packers look to get back into the playoffs after heartbreakingly missing last year? One quick update before that. Yes, you may have noticed by now, but the Green Bay Packers training camp schedule has been released. Yeah, it's completely out there now. Of course, the Packers didn't want to be too nice. They didn't want to give us all the times, but we now at least know what days the Packers are going to be practicing as open to the public. So if you're at all interested, make sure you get to Rainichke Field. Of course, before the times listed, and if you want to get a bleacher seat, get there like 45 minutes to an hour before the practices start. But as I've said all along, you can bank on the fact that except for the numbers in the 20s there, because that's when I'm with my family, but every single practice leading up to August 20th, I'm going to be, or I'm planning on being, at every single one, and then doing a show thereafter to talk about what I see on the field. I've got even some cool collaborative things in the mix where you may see me with some other podcasters as well. So really, really looking forward to training camp. It's one of my happiest times of year. Really looking forward to making it a priority this year and being there every single day that I can. And I'd love to meet some of you there as well. So let's do this. Let's dive in to this Green Bay Packers schedule. And of course, we know the Packers, they're a young team. They got a fair amount of question marks themselves, right? What's Jordan Love going to be? Who's the punter going to be is an interesting question that's emerged online this week. Might Malik Heath, the UDFA wide receiver, actually crack the roster? So many questions yet to be determined, but nonetheless, we've got a decently good feel for most of the team. Obviously, a lot hinges on Love, but I mean, we at least know who a lot of the stars are going to be for the Packers, right? We can kind of do the same thing with every other team. Speaking of programming, just super quick note for you. On Monday, I'm going to be covering the back half of this schedule. So same thing, just the back half, and then we'll have the complete picture of the schedule. And then you can look forward to later on in the week, I might be talking about Malik Heath and Brenton Cox Jr., a little bit more of a deep dive, considering that they're the two UDFAs that really have made some waves throughout the course of this offseason program. And then you can also anticipate one of the topics that I'm looking forward to coming up is looking at all of the Packers' impending free agents, all the guys that have 1 year left on their contract. And we know that the Packers have made it a point in recent years to kind of kick off training camp with a contract extension. Might one of the players entering the last year of their contract be that guy this year, be it Rashawn Gary, A.J. Dillon, amongst several others? And I will say, too, I know many of you out there also listen to Andy Herman. That was my planned topic for today. Like, that's what I was going to do today. Did some looking up into it last night, did some figuring out. Then I woke up this morning, and of course, if you follow Andy Herman, he puts his stuff out at like 6 in the morning. And this is what he covered for today. And as I've said before, I don't like necessarily doubling up. I don't like giving you the exact same stuff to hear about twice the same day, because I know a number of you listen to multiple Packer creator, insider, whatever we are. And so I don't want to do that to you. So I'll give it a couple days, then you'll hear that from me next week. Let's dive into this schedule. Week 1, the Green Bay Packers head to Chicago, starting it off at Soldier Field against Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears. The Bears are going to be playing their yearly Super Bowl against the Packers in Chicago. We already know that this is one of the biggest games of the year for them. And the Bears, I mean, if you've talked to any number of Bears fans this offseason, they entered the year with the number one pick. They have this wealth of cap room, right? And certainly Bears fans feel as though the franchise has really improved to the point where they're easily going to surpass the Packers now that Aaron Rodgers is gone. But to me, the truth is, yeah, there's reasons for optimism. I mean, as I said a long time ago, Justin Fields' numbers this year were actually pretty reminiscent of Jalen Hurts' numbers before he exploded onto the scene more fully this year. Plus, they've added DJ Moore, one of my most underrated receivers in the NFL. And they did some nice things in the draft. I mean, we can't completely ignore that. And then also in their free agent spending spree, they attempted to improve their offensive line, although I don't know how fruitful that's going to turn out being. And they really addressed the inside linebacker position, adding TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds. So they have done some nice things, but still, this is a team that earned the number one draft pick. And yes, they absolutely earned it last year. Their playmakers should be pretty good. Justin Fields should be progressing. The defense still may not be great because this certainly isn't the monsters of the Midway from years ago that we're used to seeing from Chicago. They're going to be massively revved up for this game. And for Green Bay, this is the first game of a new era. And so they're going to be revved up too. Still, though, the Chicago Bears ranked last year 31st in overall run defense in terms of yards, and I'm not sure overhauling the inside linebacker position, as the Bears have, is enough to completely change that number. Yeah, it should help, but is it suddenly going to make the Bears a top-ranked run team? I doubt it. And looking at the Packers side of the ball, you can bank on the fact that they're probably going to be running the ball more than they have in recent history with A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones and a young quarterback. So, the Packers' increased speed on the defensive side of the ball should help stop Justin Fields. A healthy secondary for the Packers, regardless of whether Eric Stokes is there or not, will probably rein in the Bears' playmakers of Chase Claypool and Mooney and DJ Moore. So ultimately, I still think that the Green Bay Packers are just a more talented team, even with the question mark that is Jordan Love at quarterback. Green Bay's beaten the Bears in 8 consecutive matchups, and I don't see that changing now. Week 1 goes to the Green Bay Packers. Now, week 2, Packers stay on the road. They head to the Atlanta Falcons. And the Falcons are arguably one of the most improved teams in the NFL this year. You know, they were already a 7-10 team last year and showed quite a bit of promise in amongst all of their inconsistencies. And this offseason, what they did was they went out and added Bijan Robinson in the first round, as well as adding Mac Hollins at wide receiver, Jonnu Smith at tight end. There's still some gaps in the offense, but it's a young and exciting one. I mean, their running back room, Bijan Robinson, Cordell Patterson, and wide receiver got Drake London, who had an up-and-down rookie year, sure, but then you got Mac Hollins there as well, tight end Kyle Pitts, and if they figure out how to use Kyle Pitts in a more explosive manner this year, that could really take off. Pair him with the veteran of Jonnu Smith as well as a pretty offensive line after retaining Chris Lindstrom. Now, much like the Packers, Desmond Ridder is a question mark. He's a young quarterback who even has more starting experience than Love. And if you go peruse the Atlanta headlines like I did to prepare for this, they seem quite optimistic about their young quarterback down there in Atlanta. Defensively, they managed to add Bud Dupree, Calais Campbell, Caden Ellis, and safety Jesse Bates. So much like the Packers, this is a team just littered with questions, but also upside. I think the Falcons are going to surprise a lot of people this year if Desmond Ridder can even play competently. So second consecutive week on the road for the Packers, a young team heading to kind of a counterpart to them, let's say. Even if the Packers are a tinge more talented than the Falcons, this is probably still a game that could go the Falcons' way. So they lose the Falcons and drop to 1-1. Now, week 3, they finally get their home opener, Saints at Packers. And the Saints are a team that's been quite difficult for the Packers over this era of Packer football. And they finished 7-10 last year, just like the Atlanta Falcons. But the Saints kind of retooled. I mean, like, they went from Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton and the combos of quarterback that they had, and they had a Derek Carr, which is an upgrade for them. But then they didn't really do a whole lot else across the rest of the roster, and they really don't have money to either. So the team is still dangerous, but I don't consider them like they've been in recent history. Alvin Kamara has been notorious for destroying the Packers in recent years, but Alvin Kamara is coming off of one of his most inefficient years of his career. And you pair that, I mean, they've got Olave, they added A.T. Perry at wide receiver. That's a dangerous duo. A lot of Packer fans wanted A.T. Perry in Green Bay. But then you have this massive health question mark in Michael Thomas at wide receiver as well. No real threats at tight end, and a new quarterback in Derek Carr with an okay offensive line, certainly not one of the league's best. And defensively, they're still talented. You know, Marshawn Lattimore, and amongst Demario Davis, Cameron Jordan, lots of star-level players on that defense, but at the same time, none of them are getting younger either. To me, this Saints team feels like a team that the Packers have kind of felt like the last couple of years. Their window to truly be competitive probably has passed them by, but they are grasping to keep that window open as long as they possibly can. And they'll always be competitive, but not necessarily dangerous like they've been in years past. Pair this with the fact that it's Jordan Love's home opener, and people are going to be ecstatic about this. Green Bay picks up their second win of the year to move to 2-1. Now, week 4. Thursday night football. Lions at Packers in Lambeau. And to be totally frank, as excited as I am, I hate this game for Green Bay. I hate it a lot. Detroit has had Green Bay's number as of recent. This is a game where they're going to have 4 days prep coming off of the Saints game to get ready for the Lions. And the Lions, I think people are probably overvaluing them a little bit. Like, I've seen some like articles written and like some stuff about like how the Lions are going to be actual contenders in the NFC this year. And like some of that's probably a little bit of a stretch, but they're probably still the class of the division, probably going to win the division in my opinion. They've had the Packers number. I mean, they've won 3 straight against Green Bay. And like I said, it's a short week. Detroit's defense last year ended the season on an upswing, and it made improvements by adding Gardner Johnson from Philly at the safety position, Emmanuel Mosley at corner. They also drafted Brian Branch and Jack Campbell to help shore up their tackling, which is one thing that Detroit really struggled with at times last year, which means that they should take a step forward defensively. Got to be honest, though, if I'm a Detroit Lion fan, I'm looking at the offense. Jamison Williams, we know about his suspension throughout the first part of the year. Still have Amon-Ra St. Brown, and you brought him back. Thanks so much. Marvin Jones Jr. coming back to Detroit, re-signing. You added Jahmyr Gibbs at running back, but Jamal Williams is gone, and instead you replaced him with David Montgomery in a move that, frankly, why? I just don't know why you did it, especially with Jamal Williams being such the leader in the clubhouse that he was. But still, nonetheless, if you're a Detroit fan, a lot of your offensive success is hinged on another quality year from Jared Goff, which isn't that a bit of a question? Now, given their system, given their offensive line, given the weapons that they do have, even if it's not the most explosive in the division or anything like that, you're relying on another year from Jared Goff, and I think it's probably likely that he at least gives you a competent year. But it's a lot to stake a claim for the team that should win the NFC North to have as large of a question mark at quarterback as they do in Jared Goff. Still, though, this is one of the games that I feel most confident on the entire schedule about, and I don't see the Packers doing well here. This is Thursday night football, 4 days rest going into a game against Detroit. The Packers are going to be young and feisty this year. But are they feistier than the kneecap biters themselves led by Dan Campbell? Probably not at this juncture of the year, not yet. Packers fall at home, making their record 2-2. Now, week 5, the Green Bay Packers head to Vegas to take on the Las Vegas Raiders for Monday Night Football, the Davante Adams game. And please, I'm going to say this right now, for the love of everything Joe Barry. Joe, you put Jair on Davante and you call it a day. I don't want to deal with this garbage about like all these mismentioned. No, Jair on Davante. Done. Everything else, structure the whole defense around that. We saw them two go at it, or those two, I'm sorry, bad grammar. We saw those two go at it a ton in training camp for years. And it was one of the most fun battles that we've gotten to see. Let us live it again in Monday Night Football. Now, the Raiders themselves, they're one of the more perplexing teams of the league. So, like, They got rid of Derek Carr. They essentially dumped him. And then meanwhile, they managed to royally piss off their number one wide receiver by getting rid of his best friend, like the villain in every teen rom-com movie I can think of. But then they went out and got Jimmy G. Like, if you're going to get rid of Derek Carr, you would think they would have been in on Aaron Rodgers. Or, they've got this coup set up with Tom Brady, since that's what he likes to do about, like, coming over. But no, instead, Tom Brady is now their minority owner, and they went and got Jimmy G? I mean, this is no knock on Jimmy G. It's just, do you expect him to take you to the next level? And they've got franchise running back Josh Jacobs still back there running back at wide receiver. You do have Hunter Renfrow. They added Jacoby Myers, who they might be a little redundant with each other, but still good quality wide receivers with Devontae. Darren Waller now has been traded to the Giants. That's one playmaking portion of their offense gone. And defensively, this is extremely top-heavy. They've got great pass rushing potential in the form of Max Crosby and Chandler Jones. But still, the rest of their defense brings a lot of concerns. They ranked 27th last year in total yards, and at least on paper didn't seem to take many steps forward in spite of spending their first-round pick on another edge in Tyree Wilson. So I just don't know here how the Raiders may take on the Packers. I think the Packers are still a more talented team. So I'm concerned about Vegas, national game for these young Packers, but they're just so much more talented, it feels like, at this point. So Packers win 3-2. Now, week 6 happens to be the Green Bay Packers bye, so that means that the Green Bay Packers are heading into their bye week with a winning record at 3-2. Coming back from their bye, though, the schedule starts to get a lot more interesting. Week 7, Green Bay is at Denver. Denver massively underperformed last year and revealed themselves to be a tremendously overrated contender. And then they went out and got, in my opinion, a very overrated coach in the form of Sean Payton. So, it was a match made in heaven, really. So the return of Javonte Williams is going to help their offense a lot, and I do think Russell Wilson last year had to be a bit of an anomaly, right? I mean, as bad as they were last year, it could have just been a terrible mix, right? I mean, we've heard all the things about Russell Wilson being a diva. We heard about Nathaniel Hackett not being able to handle him. We heard about Russell Wilson not wanting to run Nathaniel Hackett. It just seems like a very oil and water mix in every possible regard. And the one thing that I will say about Sean Payton is he won't have any of that, and he does have quite a bit of experience with an aging quarterback and still game planning around them to be highly successful. So pair that with the quality wide receivers that they do have, a bolstered offensive line, and the secondary that's going to cause a lot of problems for Green Bay's young wide receivers with Patrick Surtain, Justin Simmons in at safety. Plus, Packers are traveling west, which they don't seem to do well with Matt LaFleur. And they're coming off their bye, which also hasn't exactly been great under Matt LaFleur. I just don't like this one. Maybe they're a more talented team than Denver at the end of the day, but still, I just feel like Denver's going to have their number here, and they're going to pick up the win, so the Packers fall to 3-3. Now, week 8. Minnesota at Green Bay. Yeah, I mean, sorry, Minnesota fans. Yes, you added Jordan Addison. Well done. Congratulations. And now you've got TJ Hawkinson for a full year. Yes, very good. But you also, you're getting rid of Dalvin Cook off of a terribly inefficient year. Yes. And you also have lost Adam Thielen, Patrick Peterson, Dalvin Tomlinson, Dalvin Cook, Irv Smith, Darius Smith, Eric Kendricks. So have you replaced all of that walking out the door? I know several of them are old, but that's a lot of ability walking out the door. At cornerback, they replaced Patrick Peterson with Byron Murphy, who missed a number of games last year with a back injury. Now, Byron Murphy at this point is probably a superior corner to Patrick Peterson, but still, I don't believe that their secondary is just immediately going to be fixed. And Dalvin Cook, even if he was terribly inefficient last year, over the last few years has done quite well against Green Bay. Whereas Alexander Mattison has been fine against Green Bay. So Kirk Cousins is still Kirk Cousins. The interior offensive line is still a mess after retaining Garrett Bradbury at center. Kenny Clark should feast upon that. So with all of the departures, with frenemies, Darius Smith finding his way to Cleveland, a number of other vets on the way out the door, and possibly Danielle Hunter joining all of them soon, given the news as of recent, we know that the Vikings are going to take a step back this year. I was calling that all the way back. As soon as the Packers season ended and I did preview videos on all of the other teams in the division, I talked about how I just don't see how Minnesota is going to retain all of this veteran talent or how they're going to replace all of that veteran talent. And then pair that with all of their cap issues. The fact that last year, yes, they did win a high number of games, but so many of those games were historical anomalies. How many one-score games that they had to win. How their DVOA was significantly worse than their record. And I am a believer in that you are what your record says you are. The Vikings were a 13-win team last year. They were. It's unquestionable. And sure, there's good and bad 13-win teams, whatever. They still won 13 games. But what it was indicative to me is that it's not necessarily sustainable. And I can't say, looking at the Vikings team, that they made these moves that are going to make them more exciting. Davenport is not Sedarius Smith. Madison is not Dalvin Cook, even though Dalvin Cook had an off year last year. So, a lot of questions. I think Minnesota's stepping back. And Green Bay, we know, even given the end of last year, and I know if you talk to Minnesota fans, like, they were coasting. The year was over for them, right? They were just getting to the playoffs. Green Bay can hang with Minnesota, no doubt about it. And at home, they're going to in week 8. They pick up the win to move to 4-3. Now, week 9. This is the last week that I'm going to talk about today. It's Rams at Packers. I'm going to keep this really short and sweet so we can get out of here for the day. But here's the deal. Matt LaFleur does very, very well against Sean McVay. The Rams have one of the worst overall rosters in the NFL. Their stars are amongst the best. Don't get me wrong. Aaron Donald, one of the best defensive tackles probably ever. Cooper Kupp, a wide receiver, one of the best in the league. Matthew Stafford, if he's healthy, still in the top echelon of quarterbacks. But Jalen Ramsey's gone. A lot of the players, gone. This Rams team is rebuilding. And you know what? It's hard to even fault them. They did their mission. They won the Super Bowl 2 years ago. It's what they wanted. They got it. But they are rebuilding. And Green Bay should be in a better spot than the Rams this year. So they take this one and move to 5-3. Now, if you're thinking, oh, this dude doesn't know what he's talking about, the Packers, there's no way they're going to be 5-3. There's still a whole other half of the schedule. Like, the Packers are going to lose some more games here. I'm just, spoiler alert, but we're just getting to all those on Monday. Do I think the Packers will start strong? Yeah. This team is young. And you know what? To steal a very, very youthful phrase, the vibes around them are immaculate. Look, the gist is the Packers are going to be a hyper-athletic team that's going to screw up a lot. But I gave the rationale as to why this early portion of the schedule is setting up so that the Packers can find themselves successful in the early part of the year. They're going against some teams with some equally as large question marks as the Packers have. Now, in the second half of the year, they go against a couple more established teams. Maybe a little bit more difficult. But at least to start, I think the Packers are going to find themselves in a favorable position at 5-3. Thanks so much for joining me on the Lombardi Time Brews. I will be back Monday. If you're curious to know how the rest of the schedule goes, check out Monday evening's video. And as I said, I'll be here all next week. So go have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Thanks for joining me here. And as always, go Pack Go.